Hi, I'm Robert, back again. Okay, I've got to keep telling these stories before we really get to the point of what's happening, because I've got to try to prime your mind, just like priming a pump, to try to get you to understand sort of what's going on. Anyway, it's just my way, I don't know any other way. So this story is going back in history about 600 years. It's a famous story, everybody knows about it, or most people know about it, of Joan of Arc in around the 1400s, early 1400s, during the 100-Year Wars between France and England. This was near the end of the wars. Anyhow, let's get going into it. Joan of Arc, born in France, January 1412, at Domery on the Meuse River. Her father, Jacques d'Arc. Joan of Arc was not from a place called Arc, it was just simply her surname. Her mother's name, Isabel Romy, a devout Catholic. They owned a small farm. Her siblings, I don't know the exact number. I have a couple of books about Joan. One states clearly one brother, one sister. The other book says 3 elder brothers and 1 sister. If you start looking on the web, well, you get all different variations. So really, we aren't sure, except she did have siblings that we know. In any case, she worked on a small farm attending animals and doing her daily jobs, but this was not her thing. Therefore, not so good at farm work. Her passion was her religion, or more so, her God. If the bell rang from the village church, Joan would stop her chores, drop everything, and tear off to the church for the call of Mass. I mean, don't you think that was a really nice, innocent thing for a little girl? To daydream about the matters of our Creator, to serve God, is much more important than mere farm work. I think it is. And I think Joan, for that, I like Joan for that reason alone, maybe above all any other of her noted achievements. Just the fact that she loved God and wanted to run and serve God. That's what she believed. Anyway, as she grew older, Joan was starting to hear voices from God and the saints, St. Catherine, St. Margaret and St. Michael. Probably these voices started in her early teens, 13 to 14. At the time, France was fighting England in the famous 100 Years' War. The period was near the end of that war. The English were fighting fiercely for actual control of France. Around the age of 15, 17 or 16, Joan was getting very agitated by the English, who were now occupying some areas of France. The voices grew stronger from her God, her saints, to join the fight and push the English out of France, her homeland. She was already starting to wear men's clothing. Maybe she was a tomboy, still feminine, but a bit rough and ready type of a young lady. Or she could have been already planning to fight in the French army, being disguised as a young man, therefore she could enter and participate with less questions being asked. Joan wanted France to be ruled by the French. She wanted the Dauphin, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Dauphin, Dauphin, to one day be crowned king. The Dauphin means the son of the king, meaning the heir to the throne. So she did manage to enter the army to fight the French soldiers. Now again, I can't find in the history books the exact same stories of how she fought. I've read she was in full armour, straight and tall on a horse, swinging a sword in the battles. Also, I've read she never had any armour or weaponry. The item she carried was a cloth banner pictured with a field sown with lilies. The world, the globe, was on it, with angels each side of the world. Also the words Mary and Jesus. So in whatever capacity you would like to believe Joan went into battle is up to you. We do know, though, she was there as a brave young lady. In some way, she was involved to a degree. Amazing, a degree. Organising, she was involved to a degree. Organising men or leading men, being in at least a dozen battles against the English. In some battles, Joan's presence made a difference of winning or losing the fight. Maybe she was a great speaker, motivating the men to be courageous in fighting for their country, the king. Or maybe she could swing a sword with skill. As I said, there has been so many stories, poems, plays, books and movies about Joan of Arc. You have to make up your own mind to a certain degree. I assume some in society like to keep her as more of a myth, meaning men that prefer women to be kept in their place, so to speak. How dare anyone talk of a woman doing something brave and honourable? The other end of the spectrum are feminists that may embellish anything about what Joan done. On this debate, I totally agree with the feminists. I think she was simply a very brave young girl who stood up for what she believed in, and for that, Joan paid the ultimate price. Okay, we get on with the story. Joan was finally captured at the siege of Compiègne in May 1430. After a couple of escape attempts, Joan was taken to Rouen. It's a place in France. Rouen. Here her captors were jostling best what to do with the prized prisoner. They wanted her executed, but did not want to do it themselves, for this would give reason to upset the French, who were, when I say they were in Rouen in France, the English occupied parts of France. That's why the English are there. But they didn't want to do it themselves. They didn't want to upset the French, who were sympathetic towards Joan, or some were. Also, some French actually sided with the English in this 100 Years' War. The English didn't want to risk losing those supporters either. So they organised a group of judges for her trial. The best chance these officials had was to charge her with heresy. Heresy, well, that means if you say anything, believe or practice actions contrary to the orthodox doctrine of the Catholic Church, Christianity, meaning if you're found guilty of heresy, the punishment can mostly be death. Also, this trial was ran by the church, not by the state. So the Earl of Warwick was brought in to control the trial, while the Bishop Caution, and the French Inquisitor served as judges. So the trial began. During the trial, Joan was kept in the Rouen, R-O-U-E-N, that's the place in France, the Rouen Castle, in a high tower. I'm just going to get, that's the Rouen Castle, that's in Rouen the Castle, and she was kept top in that castle. She was kept at the Rouen Castle in a high tower. She was shackled with leg irons, a chain, then fastened to a big heavy hunk of wood. So she was high up in the castle and shackled to a hunk of wood. English soldiers kept guard over her 24/7. She was taken down to the royal chapel that was in the ruined castle for most of her trial questioning, although a cardinal of Winchester would visit Joan in her cell. A cardinal of Winchester would visit her in her cell to persistently, relentlessly interrogate her while she was sick and shackled. So a cardinal of the church would go up, not part of the trial really, but go and question her intensely. Now all the court documents of the questioning asked and answered by Joan were all filed and kept right up to this day. Amazingly, you can still now today actually read it all. So the whole trial you can actually still read today from 600 years ago. It's all kept, but not the stuff that this awful Cardinal of Winchester, that's not written down anywhere. Okay, Henry Beaufort. That's the name of the Cardinal of Winchester, Henry Beaufort. In his red robe, I've got a picture, or it's a painting obviously of him. Look at this. Look at the creep questioning Joan in the tower. I'd like to describe what I think of that, but there'd be a lot of rude words, but you just look at I can't say. So he's got all the power. 18, 19-year-old girl chained there, and he's interrogating her. I'll show you again. It makes me sick. Yeah. Good picture, good painting, isn't it? Delaroche, Dlaroche is the name of the painter, by the way. Done a fantastic job. The Cardinal Beaufort in the painting. His finger is pointing downward. His is interpreted as pointing to hell, all while Joan's hands are clasped in prayer. The painter Delaroche also has a scribe in the background, but like I said, there is no records, or I haven't found them anyway, of this questioning of her in the cell. Yeah, that's how authority works. All power and narcissists. Anyway, that was the Cardinal Henry Beaufort in the red robe. He was attempting to get a confession out of her for sorcery with trick, pressure, intimidating, interrogating questions. Of course, the actual trial held in the ruined chapel had the same line of questions. At the start, Joan was told to swear on an oath to tell the truth, which she refused to swear on that oath, only agreeing to a watered-down version. So the long, drawn-out, complicated trial began. Joan was consistently asked about the voices she heard, the words from God and her saints, the men's clothing she wore, also about her place in the military. She had no aid, support, or advocate of any kind. Joan was on her own to defend herself against the power of the church. Slowly she got worn down. She knew the consequences if found guilty of heresy or sorcery or being a witch. Burning at the stake would be her fate. With this in the back of her mind constantly, in the end, she told the judges she would agree to their demands and renounce the voices of God and her saints. And she would not wear men's clothes, only women's clothes. This was maybe to get sympathy from the judges so she could get off the charges. But days went on and her conscience, her true self, could not keep up this charade. Even though this change would save her, this change, the way that she said she never talked to God, she never spoke like that to get off the charges, they would save her life, because the judges then sentenced her to imprisonment. So she got life imprisonment, but not death. But a week later, she dressed in her cell in men's clothes. She couldn't take it. She just wanted to do what she naturally felt. And said the voices had returned. This quickly travelled to the bishop. The court, the bishop, Colshan, found her guilty. Orders were swift. They sentenced her to be burnt at the stake the next day. Joan must have known this would happen by saying the voices had returned, so she knew what she was going to be in for. So she knew she could sort of handle it, or she would have been mixed up all on her own, 18, in a jail, shackled. In any case, the next day of her death, she was inconsolable. She cried that why must she be burnt? Her body has never been corrupted, and she will be turned to ash. Joan yelled, I would much rather be beheaded than burnt. She could not be consoled or comforted, though. This is absolutely unbelievable. A 19-year-old peasant farm girl, a brave young lady, a virgin, being put to death by the so-called intelligent authorities. This, even though it happened 600 years ago, upsets me greatly even today. And it should upset you, because as I'm going to explain, nothing's changed. You see, back then they had clothes, they knew how to make jewellery, they had language, they knew what pain and fear were. And the top, the cream of the crop, the church, got most intelligent, most aware, apparently, were going to burn the young girl at the stake. Unbelievable. You don't believe me yet, but things are the same today, because that's how authority works. But anyway, we'll get on with the story for now. Joan was put on a wooden cart at 9 o'clock in the morning, May the 30th, 1431, now in what you would call women's clothes. She was crying uncontrollably. 10,000 spectators came to see the witch burn. 10,000 gaggling, crap frigging public come to watch a human being, a young girl, get burnt at the stake. She was crying uncontrollably. 10,000 spectres came to see the witch burn. She was proclaimed a heretic, a worshipper of false gods. A priest gave a short sermon and she was tied to the stake, which was high up on scaffolding, all the wood underneath. Now, exactly what was said or done varies a little, except she was burned at the stake. Some stuff I read, she was chained to the stake, tied to the stake. Some say higher than normal, so the crowd could get a good view of her. This is like, I don't know who the actress is, but obviously it's a black and white movie, and she's got short hair, and it's just a picture. Would have been a black. I don't know who the actress is. But you see how the executioner is holding her, and they're going to light all those sticks. She always had her hair short to mimic a man. There's that many pictures and stuff, obviously, because back then they never had cameras. This is a movie. I don't know who that actress is. That's the scene. So higher than normal, so the crowd could get a good view of her. The fire was lit. The flames leapt up. Apparently the executioner would stand nearby and often reach up and choke the person to death, making the death not as cruel. One writer says the executioner could not reach Joan's neck because she was up too high, so she suffered terribly. The last words were Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. When the fire died down and Joan d'Arc, Jeanne d'Arc, as in French, she was dead. But they rekindled the fire 2 more times to make sure Joan was totally burned, all her organs, etc., so no one could claim any part of her. Joan's ashes were thrown into the River Seine. Hooray, the witch is dead. So that's basically, in a short story, of the poor Jeanne d'Arc. Today, so-called modern-day psychiatrists claim she would be diagnosed with schizophrenia or epilepsy, having hallucinations. I don't think any of that is true. She was simply a religious girl, a religious young girl, lady, fighting, being brave to stand up to the English, defend her king, her home, her country. That's all. It's strange the same psychiatrists don't even mention the psychopathic, narcissist, sadistic men leaders that had the power to torture, execute a beautiful, strong young lady. Shouldn't the so-called psychiatrists of today be condemning the church, the political leaders of the murderous, sick, mental illness those ones in power 600 years ago must have had? I think the spotlight should be on those deranged psychopathic leaders, not the innocent mind of a brave young lady. I promise you, 600 years later, nothing has changed. Like I said, I've got to prove that to you. Last word now on Joan. This only adds to her terrible plight. The group who actually turned Joan over to the English, and listen to this, they were actually French. They were the Burgundian faction, who were French nobles that became allied to the English. And they didn't just, they captured Joan during that battle. They didn't just hand Joan over to the English, they sold her to the English for a 10,000, I don't know how this money is the word, it's livres tournois, 10,000 livres tumorous. Whatever, I'm not sure what that is, but it's 10,000 whatever's how that money is pronounced. So the English paid 10,000 to the French to get Joan of Arc. Her own countrymen sold her to the English. This is how authorities work 600 years ago or today. The French king who Joan actually fought for could have easily negotiated with the English for her release. But since she was charged with so many crimes, 70 in all, including heresy, witchcraft, the French king thought it best to distance himself well away from Joan. So he made absolutely no attempt to negotiate for Joan's release at all. I mean, what a total absolute scumbag, and that's a king. The young lady that fought for France, her country, and the king himself, he didn't want to touch the silly little girl who was going to be burnt at the stake, who actually fought to defend him. Same goes on today. Only on a bigger scale. It's hidden, but the same goes on. Because now we've got technology, and they've refined what they've done 600 years ago, have been refined. Only thing is the weaponry and the technology and has increased. So he made no attempt for a release at all. That's like really copying it from all sides, isn't it? Imagine, innocent young girl. That concludes this subject. Again, I stress to you, nothing has changed, as in your leaders or as your enemy neither give a damn about you. Neither give a shit about you, I can promise you that. Your leader or your enemy. No, nothing in human nature has changed. Yes, back then they had horses and swords. Now we have tanks and bombs. The authorities will use their own innocent people to fight for their country. Here's your sword. Here's your gun. Off you go. When the shit hits the fan, they know it will. And it will. That splatter is for you, not for them. They will be in a nice room 1,000 miles away.